In the heart of Iowa, a small town found itself haunted by something otherworldly. In the early 1900s, locals claimed to see a bizarre winged creature with glowing eyes swooping down from the sky before disappearing. So today, we explore the chilling encounters and mysterious reappearance of the Van Meter visitor. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and a little bit of that supernatural goodness. I am your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins, and joining me, hearing this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
Ooh, you know it's going to be a fun one when we're talking about cryptids.
We got some monsters, some legends. Have you ever heard of the Van Meter visitor?
No, and if I heard it, I wouldn't think it's a cryptid. Like, who named this one? Like,
it's just a man that rolled to town. I'm just visiting a cryptid.
It's just surprising to me that a name like Squonk is more, I guess, appealing than the Van Meter something. What? Visitor? Van Meter visitor. There you go.
Yeah.
Weird cryptid name. As always with cryptids, I'm very excited to hear about the origins, the creature's abilities, weaknesses. I treat it like a monster movie.
You treat it like a superhero.
Yeah, that too. Because it's got a weakness. It's got it's a ebb and flow to everything. How tall is it? What does it look like? Because a lot of the cryptids, they're weird, man. And we go back to Squonk because it's such a unique one. But like, that's one that looks like an ugly pug. And then you look at it, it cries and melts. So anything's on the table. Anything's on the table when it comes to cryptids. And I'm very excited.
I'm totally with you. We got Squonk, which is like this unique name out of this ugly pug from the swamps. But now we just have somebody named after the town it came to.
Right. Maybe they just ran out of word or like names to give it, but then also at the same time it also feels like every town wants to have a cryptid story,
sure,
or like a haunted something story, that pertains to their town or home specifically.
Right, they're like, we need people to move to Iowa, so we need something glossy, something like a man batting around the rooftops with wings.
I
don't know the timeline of these cryptids and monsters. Some go way, way back.
Right.
But we're talking early 1900s. We'll get into it, but it's 1903 when this creature shows up. So we are in the very early phases of the monster explosion that hits America. Maybe they just haven't figured out the naming conventions yet,
That's true. I mean, when you're the early adopters and testers of things, it's not as refined. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so now the naming, I'm sure looking back, it's like, the naming conventions back then probably weren't that great.
Right.
But sometimes they stick around. I mean, look at comics, Spider-Man, Batman. I mean, these are not great names.
Right. It's just a creature plus a guy.
Right.
But I mean, we'll get into it. The whole episode about Mothman was, I was pitching my proposal was that it was an unsung hero, that I was initiating some propaganda that this was actually a man who just wanted to be Batman. We are now 36 years prior to Batman's arrival in the world, and so we might have the Genesis story on our hands, and I'm excited to talk about it. But before we do, of course, as always, huge shout outs to the Task Force members over at patreon.com/redweb. It is the best way to support the show. You get this podcast ad-free. Fredo hosts a podcast called Movie Club. We talk about horror movies, good and bad.
Oh, yeah. Both good and bad. And I think we're heading down a path of sloppy horror movies.
Oh, we're going to get in the muck, as you call it. I'm excited. But yeah, I want to shout out some Task Force members like Emily Moser and the Squonks, of course, Chase Martinez, Alex Tuck, Jared Osborne, and Andy Schrock, to name a few. And we are on the precipice of October. It is my favorite month, and so we have a lot going on. So speaking of Movie Club, it is our Movie Club Spooky Month. So for October, especially for you Patreon members, we are doing Movie Club every single week. Normally it's the first and third Friday, but this month we are really indulging in the spooky movies, and we're doing one every single Friday. So head over there to get more details about how many you're going to get, but basically everyone's getting doubled up. And if you sign up for Patreon for an annual membership, you'll save 10%. Again, patreon.com/redweb. Get those movie club goodness. And over at store.redwebpod.com, we're working on some minimalist ghosty merch. Maybe some embroidered hats, maybe little cheeked up baby hands in a situation on a shirt. I don't know. Honestly, we're recording this podcast way out in advance. We're still figuring out the merch, but head to the store.
Yeah, but you get a little sneak peek behind the mind.
You get to see how it's working. The cheeks come first, and then we build the ghost around
and then you build from you build up from there.
Yeah, the priorities.
I like that. The signature feature, cheeked up little ghost.
It's a ghost that haunts back first. He comes at you in reverse, Under the moonlight, he moonwalks at you. Ooh. Okay, I don't know if we've given Baby Hands a voice yet. Maybe it's best he doesn't have one. But with all that said, thank you, Task Force members. Let's dive into the story of the Van Meter visitor. In the fall of 1903, the small town of Van Meter, Iowa, was supposedly visited by a strange creature. As of 2020, I just want to give you an idea of how small and quaint this town is. We've talked about many small towns before, but in 2020, the population was around 1,500 people. But in 1900, this quiet town only had about 400 residents. Talk about everybody knowing everybody.
Oh my goodness. Almost too small. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's almost too small to why are we a town? But I guess it's got to start somehow, some way.
Right. When does it become unincorporated? I don't know. But maybe when a moth comes batting in and you got Mothman. Well, I guess Van Meter visitor. You're gonna see they're very similar.
But also, they didn't have vans back then.
What? That's actually true.
Right? What does van stand for during those times?
Listen, this is Van Halen's great grandfather.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess a name, right? Van or Vaughn or that kind of stuff.
Definitely, yeah, probably more of a Vaughn. But to give you a better idea of where this is located geographically, it is about a 20-minute drive from the capital city of Des Moines, which is essentially right in the middle of the state. Or if you're our global task force, let's just say it's vaguely somewhere in the middle of the continental United States. We are in the Great Plains, as it were. Now, starting toward the end of September that year, reports from Van Meter citizens began coming in describing a strange creature flying around and sitting on rooftops. This entity would later become known as the Van Meter visitor. According to the St. Paul Globe, U.G. Griffith, who was a tool salesman, was driving around at 1 a.m. on September 29th when he noticed what he thought was a searchlight on a local store. And so he stopped. He decided, I'm going to take a look at this. Normally, there's not a searchlight at 1 a.m. But when he looked, the light seemingly moved suddenly away, and something then shifted from one rooftop to another. That's the first encounter. The next evening, the town doctor named A.C. Alcott was sleeping in his office when he was suddenly woken up by a bright light. He described what he saw as half man, half animal, some sort of being, and it had bat-like wings and appeared to be 9 foot tall, or about 2.8 meters, and had a horn on its head, kind of like a unicorn. Oh yeah. In addition to having this horn, he claimed that the horn itself could shoot beams of light.
What the heck? What?
Mm-hmm.
Beams of light?
Yeah.
I feel like that's just the moon reflecting off of something, off of I don't know, the little pipe on the roof or something.
Like the gutter?
Yeah, like I don't know, some kind of little smokestack back. I mean, 1900 or something like that. Some little tiny smokestack thing. Piping or something, and then maybe I don't know, trees or brush flew in the wind, got stuck on it, and then all of a sudden it's look at that, it's half man, half beast, and it's shooting light.
It's one of those exhaust vents that's just highly polished, refracting moonlight, caught trash, and now it's a beast.
Yeah. Well, I like to think when we get stories like this, they're not made up.
Sure.
And more so they've seen something, right? Because the eyes and the mind easily play tricks on you. And we like to see patterns in things. You look up in the clouds, you like to see patterns. Look at shadows, we like to see patterns of things and make something of it. So that's why I always assume with these kind of descriptions or encounters or testimonials that it's just someone that saw something and then exaggerated it.
Absolutely. So what is that thing? It could easily be a series of pipes on a roof. We don't know.
Exactly. And so I like to break it down in terms of what could have been the thing that they saw that would make it look like that?
Right. 9 feet tall, hanging out on rooftops. Now, here's the thing. Not only does it have a horn that shoots beams of light, the St. Paul Globe also reported on this particular sighting and said that the creature had a, quote, stupefying odor. We're talking skunk ape material right here.
I mean, that's got to be like a really, really bad odor if it's on the roof and you're able to like smell it, you know?
Yeah. So you'll be proud about Dr. Alcott here because it was on site. As soon as he sees this visitor, he pulls out his shotgun and blasts the thing, and it doesn't seem phased whatsoever.
It's not. It's just because it's just plants and stuff and twigs in a tree.
I love that's our theory number one, that it's twigs and trash caught on a high polished pipe.
Yeah, it's not moving. I wonder why.
The thing is terrifying. Now, what's interesting is, of course, he shot it. It didn't seem phased, but what's been reported in various sources is that UG Griffith, the tool man we talked about before, he also may have shot at it, but sources are unclear. So we're going to notice a trend. A lot of people, when they see this creature, it's on site, they start blasting. And I know that's your initial instinct. Anytime we talked about these spooky entities before, you're always going, I'm taking it out.
You don't take chances.
No, not with a 9 foot tall, horned up, bat-winged creature on the roof. You never know what could happen.
You never know. And this whole entire encounter reminds me and makes it more visual because we use movies as a visual representation,
of course,
on this show. It reminds me of the rooftop scene in the beginning of the movie Signs by M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh my gosh, I might forget that scene.
Where he goes into his daughter's woken up in the night. He goes essentially Mel Gibson wakes up and his daughter's like, there's a monster in my room. And he goes in there and he sits next to her in the bed and he's like, there's nothing. It's totally fine. And he looks out the window onto the rooftop is this figure of a person on the rooftop. And he just stands up abruptly and just staring at it. And I'm just like, oh man, what a whew. And that's what this reminds me of.
Yeah.
Just imagine walking outside your backyard, just, in the middle of the night and just a nice little breeze and just look up at the rooftops that you've seen a million times. And then there's just something on the roof that looks like a person.
That's actually terrifying.
Right.
Yeah, that's high key terrifying. You're walking out to the outhouse. We still got one of those, no plumbing yet. And here at the task force, we are vintage. We go out to the outhouse, you look up at the moon, maybe you're looking at patterns in the clouds and you see a figure on the roof. No way.
Yeah. That
would send chills down my spine.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know what to do, man.
I'd be deer in the headlights. But yeah, I mean, that creature was standing next to, what did you say? A pipe on the roof, some sort of exhaust system. So who knows? Did Mel Gibson see an alien or did he see just a series of pipes and twigs?
That's true.
So these are the first two sightings. Now, after this, on yet another evening, Clarence Peter Dunn, both the town doctor and, this man was versatile, the bank cashier, also saw this visitor.
I mean, small town back then. I'm sure people had to take up multiple roles. But it's just interesting to hear that.
Yeah, we got two town doctors, by the way. And so part of my theory was that maybe this was a third town doctor dressing up, trying to scare the other doctors out of town. This town ain't big enough for the two of us. Not enough sick people go around, only 400 people.
Only 400.
Yeah.
I take care of all of them myself.
I like we're treating it like the 1820s cowboys or something.
Right. We're going way back.
They do have cars, but I like to think that the town is just filled with horses and that they're scared that this beast is going to come down and snatch one of their friendly little horse.
I mean, that's valuable, way more valuable.
100%.
Back then, I feel like.
That'd be like Mothman stealing your car.
Yeah, it would be. That's your mode of transportation or getting things done around the farm that would otherwise be either very cumbersome or impossible for you to do.
100%. Very, very valuable. And so I can understand if that was the way the town was, defense is of the utmost. But Mr. Dunn here, Dr. Dunn, I should say, also shot at the creature, but to no avail. Dunn reportedly made a plaster imprint of its footprints. We have seen this in the Bigfoot days, right? You pour plaster into the mold or of the foot imprint, let it harden, pull it out. Now you have kind of proof, so to speak, of the track. And he called these prints the Great Three-Toed Tracks, in his words. Now, later that same night, a high school teacher also saw the visitor, and he referred to it as the devil. So now like the sightings are starting to spread. And what's interesting to me is that it is starting with doctors, bankers, toolmen. It's kind of seeing everybody. But it's also people that end up working a little bit late. Maybe like one of the doctors was sleeping in their office. And so it's a wide swath of people, so you want to have some trust in that. But it's also people that are working late. And so that'll kind of play into the theories a little bit. But it's interesting to me.
It's also people that you think you would be able to trust, you know, whether or not like you should. People are more likely to trust someone that is seen as educated,
sure,
or seen as that of authority.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are also people that most of the town would know,
true,
or come face to face with personally. And so, yeah, high trustworthy figures, job or otherwise. But sightings continued through the end of September into the beginning of October. So we are sitting here pretty in the 121st anniversary of the sighting of this creature. Now, one night, O.V. White was woken up in the night to see the same creature perched on the telephone lines. So White himself, of course, shot at the creature, which woke up another Van Meter citizen, Sidney Gregg. And Gregg got up, also saw the creature, and later claimed that it hopped away just like a kangaroo.
Oh, I thought you were going to say also shot at the creature.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Craig also woke up, popped off a couple of shots, and went to bed.
Right. Oh, we shooting out here? Let's go.
Who are we firing at? That thing? All right. So these are the sightings. This is what kicked it off in the town. So let's compile the knowledge that we have so far. I say knowledge loosely. Against all these sightings: nocturnal, wings like a bat, 9 feet tall, unicorn horn on its head, stinks worse than the 9 hells, shoots beams of light from its horn, it's bulletproof, it's 3-toed, it hops like a kangaroo, and it enjoys rooftops and telephone lines. By the way, I did want to look into this. Telephone lines these days, quite strong. They could hold several thousand pounds.
Jesus.
Telephone lines from 1903, probably holding 10 to 20 pounds. These were not high robust electric wires. You know, we transmit lots of power through these lines to get far and wide.
Oh, yeah.
These lines were a little chintzy and mostly used for local communication, and it's not like they were high strength lines. I was trying to picture somebody with these big wings, 9 feet tall, standing on a power line, and I'm like, how is that thing not crashing down?
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. That's the type of things where the stuff starts to like fall apart, where you go, how is that possible? Right.
That's when I think one of the theories in particular starts to really sing more than another. But we'll get into all that. But with this description in mind and all of these sightings kind of beginning to spike, a group of citizens in this town got together with the intent of finally getting rid of the so-called Van Meter visitor. They traveled to an abandoned mine. This is a new element to the lore here, where it supposedly lived.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's living in the mines.
All right. Well, how do we get that information? How do we get there?
Right.
I mean, I feel like...
Where's the eyewitness account?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it was rumored. We don't know. Maybe somebody saw it fly that direction. We couldn't find that piece. But they did come face to face with the Van Meter visitor and a smaller version of it. This thing's got a child.
What? I feel like I missed.
The lore is juicy, okay? The tea is hot.
I feel like it's a comic book story arc where it's just like we're getting the main issues and then it's just like, want to see how Van Meter ended up with a child? Read issue number 500 in this other like series. And I'm just like, what did this happen?
Yeah. So they figured out the mines. They go to the mines. They see it. They're like face to face with it. Then they look down. You know what? I shouldn't say look down. They looked not up at the 4.5 foot tall, smaller version of the visitor, because if it was about half the size, it would be about 4.5 feet tall. And I don't know, maybe they blasted off a few shots. But the Des Moines Daily newspaper described the situation like this, quote, "Presently the noise opened up again as though Satan and a regiment of imps were coming forth for battle." So it's very dramatic.
Oh, very dramatic.
Very religious undertones, by the way, too, because this is the time frame. This is the, quaint local America. A lot of Christian values coming forth in their fears of what they're seeing here. It's always important, I think, and always interesting to think about what's going on in the zeitgeist. A lot of technology coming online. We're just beginning to hit flight. We're just beginning to online cars and electricity. Like, a lot of things are changing at this time. And so I wonder if any of that plays into their fears, the manifestation of these worries. I don't know.
Well, you were saying earlier too that one of the descriptions that it sang like the 7 circles of hell or something like that.
I described the stinks worse than hell, but yes, it stank to high heaven, or quote, stupefying odor is how the St. Paul Globe put it. Yeah. I like to add a little extra flourish, but no, it did have a very strong stupefying odor because we'll get around to that, but apparently it stunk so bad it made them forget, if that makes any sense.
Damn.
Yeah, it's like, despite being shot at, okay, so they did shoot at it. Multiple people rolled up at the mine. They started blasting off, and the 2 creatures didn't react, but instead they took off. And as they flew away, there was a bright flash of light, and they left behind a strange smell that the group kind of only described as, quote, memory erasing.
I mean, go grab a little bit of that, because that would be super valuable to anybody who has it.
Sure, but I'm also like, how'd they remember any of this? Somebody rolls up with a gas mask and be like, I'll be the journalist.
You know what? That's a really good point.
It stunk so bad I forgot. Forgot what? I don't know, Doc.
No idea, but all I know is that it's something that makes me forget, but I haven't quite forgotten that part.
Right. The stink sticks around. Everything else goes away. That's how pungent it is. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by you guys, the task force. This is one of those opportunities where I just wanted to say thank you all so much for supporting the show, specifically at patreon.com/redweb. Kind of like PBS. This is an ad brought to you by you. And there are a lot of different ways you can support Red Web. We talk about it all the time in the proper show, but here in this little special ad break, I felt like I wanted to expand upon it a little bit. What is Patreon? What do you get with Patreon? As well as, of course, supporting with merch, the store.redwebpod.com domain. You can also share the show for free. You can review us wherever you listen to us. All of that means the world to us. It supports us in so many different ways, but Patreon is our bread and butter. It is where we built our community even tighter. We have exclusive Discord access where our community theorizes together and talks together. They suggest movies to watch, as well as cases to cover in the proper show. You also get this podcast entirely ad-free, so you won't hear these little ad breaks in the middle. And we also have all sorts of other bonus stuff like looks behind the scenes. In September, on the 25th, we're going to use the Randonautica app, which is an app we've covered in the past, and we're so excited to finally go film that, and it's going to go up exclusively for Patreon members. We've uploaded sneak peeks, behind the scenes, things that haven't released before. We had a Mothman commercial that came out, which was absolutely hilarious. Then, of course, we have Discord events every single month. So these 2 visitors apparently returned to the site the next morning. I don't know if people were camping out. I don't know if they went and checked on it the next day, but they flew off, leave some stink, try to wipe a memory, flash some light. They come back the next morning after being shot at again. Okay. They then disappeared deeper into the mines. And supposedly this is where they maybe lived. They went underground somewhere into the caves and then disappeared. Never to be seen. Well, not to be seen again for quite some time, I should say, because reports have continued to this day, including a couple more modern ones. I want to talk about those. One interesting sighting was in 1980, according to Chad Lewis, who co-wrote a book on the Van Meter visitor and the Daily Yonder, a news outlet that focuses on rural America. This story features an individual who moved to Van Meter without having actually heard of the visitor, which I want to trust, but I greatly appreciate. They're not coming in primed. They're not ready to see anything. They don't know. As the story goes, he reported seeing a bat-like creature fly over his head, and it wasn't until he made reports on what he saw that night, he kind of described the creature, estimated a 5-foot wide wingspan, and that's when he learned about the Van Meter visitor. He was like, listen, this giant bat kind of swooped at me. Have you guys ever seen this around here? And they're like, well, that might be the Van Meter visitor. So people have seen it in more recent years, and in fact, as recently as 2020, and I was gasping for more information. I want so many more accounts because this is a very interesting creature, but there's not a lot of very vivid sightings. But as recently as 2020, someone reported seeing a giant bird. This is what they said, quote, when it flapped its huge wings, all I could see was light, dark. And it was a huge whoosh, whoosh, whoosh that I heard. And that's all they said.
I mean, that's terrifying. That's just like Jeepers Creepers.
Yes.
You hear the and I'm just like, oh man, ain't nothing that big make it sounds like that.
Yeah. You don't want to wake up in the middle of the night, look out the window, and it's tapping and it's pointing to your sister or something, and it doesn't want you, it wants them, you know?
Oh God. That's like a movie. That's a good movie.
When it's got like those vertical nose slits where it smells.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Listen, birds are just dinosaurs, and when they start flying around, they got these enormous wingspans, and you just hear whoosh. You're like, all right, I'm about to be pterodactyled. Okay, I'm about to be Jurassic Parked.
Yeah, that's not going to be good. It'll get swooped up. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
But those are the first-person accounts, all the details we have about the Van Meter visitor, aside from exploring the theories. And of course, there are many theories. I've included my own. I think you might know where I'm going with this, but we'll get there. Of course, I want to address out the gate, is this real or is this a hoax? Because, of course, with any cryptid, anything more supernatural, anything with light, tangible evidence, the idea of a hoax is always on the table. The first people to see the visitor may have made it up, or someone was wearing some kind of costume. Whatever it was, it might have started as something small and innocuous. Maybe even, like you said, a couple of twigs, a trash bag, some cloth, a pipe. And it just, out of fear, got misinterpreted into something else. And the first people who saw it, like we talked about, were considered trustworthy people. And so maybe because of that, a lot of people believed in it, and it then kind of spurred out of control from there. It was very much part of the Mothman story, right? Where we talk about a wide populace kind of psychosis, as it were, where everyone kind of believes in this illusion, but then they start seeing it and it just builds the idea. And so suddenly this snowball effect of this creature, it must be real because all these reports are pouring in, and now I'm the odd one out for not seeing it. And so suddenly it just takes the culture, or at least the local town, by storm,
I completely agree. Look, there's going to be other theories here, but it's going to be hard to pull me away from this one.
Right.
I feel like someone saw something, they vividly gave a description, and then all of a sudden, that just starts. It's the placebo effect.
Dude, everything's the placebo effect. I know we've been using that a lot lately, but I think everything is the placebo effect, in the sense that if you believe something's going to happen, you're very primed to have that happen to you.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe there's more specific language, but I like placebo effect for us, just us of the weaker minds.
Yeah. Placebo.
What was that? I don't know. Placebo.
It's probably, I don't know what it is, but it probably has something to do with placebo.
I don't know what that term is, but it must be placebo.
Yeah, it must apply here somehow, some way.
It's just us with two empty clipboards scrawling on nothing. So here's the thing, and I do appreciate this. When the St. Paul Globe first reported about this, and Griffith's story first was made public, everyone was like, all right, I don't know about all that. But it wasn't until Dr. Alcott saw the same thing that they started going, well, hold on a minute. Maybe there is something to this. And then from there, that's a perfect genesis for a local town, especially with the backdrop of everything changing in the world and things being a little strange and different. We have that now. Everything's rapidly changing. And so there's always a little bit of fear, or a little bit of conspiracy that gets juiced by that. Now, it's possible that subsequent sightings were the result of that paranoia, that kind of phenomenon, placebo we're talking about here, as a result of social contagion of knowing about and fearing the so-called visitor, especially those who wake up at night and immediately that story comes to their mind. And it's already scary enough when the lights are on, but when you're in 1903 and the sun sets, it is dark. You are not seeing anything. And so when you do see a light, you got a bright beam coming from a unicorn horn, you're gonna start feeling things. And kind of building on our little hypothesis here, it's possible that citizens simply fabricated the story to maybe ease their own minds, perhaps even ease the minds of their neighbors. Again, it's a very tight-knit community, and maybe even just to feel involved. However, this is all speculation, and there's no evidence suggesting that the sightings were ever made up, even if there isn't hard evidence proving that they happened either. It's all he said, she said, hearsay kind of stuff at this point. A fascinating story. To me, I'm with you. I think hoax is going to be hard to dismantle. To me, the question is, what was the inciting incident? What did they actually see? Was it just an illusion of normal objects, or was it something that then spiraled the rest of the stories to take on a life of its own.
I mean, that's where my head's at.
Yeah. And that's where the next theory kind of comes in. Of course, trying to pull everything together as best as possible, a lot of people believe that the Van Meter visitor was some kind of bird. We've got wings, we've got glowing eyes, we've got 3 toes, right? And it also seems likely that this is a case that the witnesses may have exaggerated their accounts out of fear. We've seen that many times, which then would address why the creature's bulletproof. Maybe it wasn't bulletproof, maybe it wasn't not startled, but maybe in your panic shooting, which everyone was kind of popping off right away at night, maybe you just missed, and maybe it wasn't as big as you thought. And so this bird, whatever it is sitting there going, I'm not deterred because you just simply missed.
Yeah, I think people think shooting is way easier than it really is.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually pretty hard to accurately hit a mark that's even 10 feet away, let alone like on maybe 30, 40 on a rooftop on an angle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as easy as it looks to actually like hit shots.
Especially if you're like, what is that thing? I must take it
bang,
out.
Bang, bang. Right. You're just shooting at it.
You're just hoping whatever it is hears the sound and maybe is scared off. But
exactly.
One of the likely suspects has been named to be the owl. Of course, we broad fearmongers of the owl and the catfish here, 2 terrifying real creatures. But in reality, they do have quite large wingspans, or they can. There's a lot of different sized owls. Their eyes reflect light, and they can appear like they're glowing. This was a prominent theory in the Mothman episode. And again, this feels very Mothman-esque.
It does. Shadowy, tall figure, wings. Instead of the red glowing eyes, we have a horn that shoots light, like some kind of unicorn.
Right. And to me, I'm like, well, maybe, the flash of the light in the eyes, is that in fear being misinterpreted as like a beam of light or a flash? It's hard to say. But of course, I have in my notes the tapetum lucidum. I don't know Latin whatsoever, some sort of placebo language. But basically, that's the tissue that's in the eyes of like cats, nocturnal creatures, owls that create that light it increases light sensitivity, but it also creates the reflection you're seeing.
The reflectiveness, yeah.
Yeah. So that just enables them to kind of see at nighttime. So to me, if it does have glowing eyes, it does seem to indicate and validate the fact that this is a nocturnal creature. It's only being seen at night. You're kind of hearing the wings, then maybe it's not an owl, but it does feel very bird-like. And another bird that comes to mind in theorists' minds are ostriches. They stand very tall. They can be upwards of 9 feet. Their wingspans themselves are sometimes over 6.5 feet, which does line up with many witnesses. They could appear to someone as being maybe half human, half animal in the dark, especially when you realize that ostriches were a strange creature at this time. The first one was brought to the Americas via California in the 1880s.
Oh.
If you're in a town in Iowa in 1903 and you see an ostrich, I don't know how it got on the roof. It's not a flying bird, but if you see it, you're going to be like, what in the hell is that?
Like, that's the thing where I'm just like, yeah, that's definitely a bird that you go, I don't know what that is. What is that? What's going on? And the beaks are pretty long.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see it, you maybe thinking it's a horn or something. But still, the question is, how does it get on the roof?
That's where maybe some prankster was like, look at this freak thing that I just got.
Right. Also, why would it be in a cave?
Yeah, this is all very interesting. And that's where you have to separate fact and fiction. Like, was it in a cave or a mine? Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, an ostrich fits the MO, except for a few things. Most birds do have 4 toes, 3 in the front, 1 in the back. Ostriches, interestingly, have real grody feet. They've only got 2 toes.
Ew.
So we're looking at something that left a giant imprint of a 3-toed impression. And it's possible that, maybe the front 3 toes left that impression and not the back. But again, this is trusting the eyewitness sources who made plaster molds. It's really hard to separate what might be exaggeration from what might be fact.
Yeah, and I'm sure everyone just went buck wild in terms of just trying to tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
And then amping each other up.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on here. I think we're somewhere between fearfully exaggerated bird watchers or some sort of widespread hoax. Because we can't really address the horn element of it. I mean, of course, there is a great horned owl, but that has just 2 feathers on either side of its head that makes it kind of look like it has horns. We're talking about a centered unicorn-style horn And no birds really have that. Unless you're, to your point, maybe it's like something to do with the beak. I don't know. To me, it definitely makes sense that it's some sort of bird or enormous bat. And then that is what spurred on the rest of the sightings. But also, you know, some of the sightings are just using nomenclature that they know, and birds are very familiar to people. And so if you saw something strange or thought you did, let's go with the idea of sticks caught on a pipe, and you saw that, and you were scared, and you thought it was this giant entity. The only way you're really going to be able to describe it is using nomenclature like wings and horn and fly and man. And so maybe whatever the truth is, it's probably a lot less intriguing than the story. But I don't know, maybe birds aren't actually in play, and those are just the adjectives used to describe it, you know?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, because you're gonna try and relate it to something, right? When you see some type of, I mean, if we were to go to space right now and see some type of alien, you know, we would describe it as something, right? Human-like or bird-like or whatnot, dog-like, etc. So that's exactly what you're gonna kind of refer to, right?
Yeah.
So that way, it's not just like it was this thing with the large arms, and then you're gonna try and relate to something to get someone a visual to honestly an attempt to make it not seem as wild,
Right.
Or to get someone on the same page as you.
You want people to believe you. So you're going to use phrases, or maybe you'll describe it via movies like we do, so people can understand it. But I mean, here's the thing. I think the initial sighting is some sort of hoax or some sort of misunderstanding that spiraled out of control. And then I think modern sightings might have been more bird-based. You know, somebody saw a bird with 5-foot wingspan swoop down at them. That could, to me, easily be a turkey vulture swooping down from the sky, thinking it had an easy meal, sees you're just kicking, you know, in your lawn chair or something, and it swoops off again.
Yeah,
you're gonna hear that thing. And I mean, turkey vultures have 6-foot wingspans, you know, so there are lots of birds that are in the area normally that could have wide wingspans. And then people historically mesh these modern sightings with the old sightings, and there you have a more complicated, you know, trail. But moving into the next theory, very, very simple, but it has been a prominent suggestion without much else to kind of expand upon. It's been suggested that the Van Meter visitor might have simply been an alien, right? Very, very much like signs.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I should have seen that coming.
Aliens are always in play. But this could, you know, address some of the extremely odd descriptions, the horn, the smell, the height. A few of those things would easily be addressed by something with no evidence, right? An alien has kind of become the MacGuffin to fit any form, but also, who knows, maybe in 50 years we'll discover these strange beings that live in mines, you know, in Iowa. And
true, you never know.
There's a whole swath of people that believe that aliens don't come from the sky, they come from the ground. And so this could be that, you know, maybe we'll see creatures coming up from out of the earth and out of the ocean. They finally want to break bread and tell us their advanced knowledge. But until then,
we're just going to keep popping off.
We're just going to keep popping off. You know, like you didn't announce yourself, you didn't knock, you didn't say hello. We're going to pop off. It's on site. But that brings me to my theory, which concludes the real theories. But again, we're 36 years pre-Batman. An enterprising mind might have conjured up the idea of a costume vigilante in this small town. Okay.
There we go.
We got doctors competing for territory. How many town doctors can you have when there's only 400 people? What percentage of them can be sick at any given time? This person might have been a tall, muscle-bound freak with makeshift wings that didn't work, hence the hopping like a kangaroo trying to take off. You know, they're flapping and jumping, but it's not working. They didn't try it very long. Wearing several cast iron pans for bulletproof protection, very much like V for Vendetta, with a flashlight on its head, hence the horde with a beam of light. Maybe they got terrible hygiene, perhaps halitosis. I don't know, I'm not a town doctor.
Do they have flashlights back then?
You know what? Maybe this is, again, a deeply enterprising mind. Maybe they invented the flashlight, you know? They invented the flashlight. They invented bulletproof. They tried to invent flight. They didn't succeed at that. But then they invented superheroes. So I'm just saying it is entirely possible that we have a vigilante on our hands.
I don't... Look, not to say it's not a vigilante, but also at the same time, what the hell did they do? Like, what are they saving?
That's true.
All they're doing is getting themselves shot at.
That's true. You know what? They just scare people.
It's terrifying people getting shot at is what they're doing.
Well, it's also the turn of October, and so maybe they were just trying to set up the spooky season. Maybe this was somebody decorating the town to be like, let's welcome in All Hallows Eve. And then people just started shooting their decorations. And they're like, all right, well, I guess I'll end that quick.
Yeah, that's true. I like these stories. They're so fun.
Listen, I'm just trying to bring that practical, tangible believability to something that is fascinating, but wildly flimsy in its evidence.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm with you. I love these stories. There's so many local cryptids from all over the country. Task Force has poured out in our suggestions form over at patreon.com/rideweb. They've suggested so many different cryptids for us to explore. Some are even thinner than this, so it becomes a little bit more difficult to talk about without just being, yep, there's an octopus in this lake and it's giant, and that's all you really have. But man, I love a good cryptid story. I think it sets the tone as we go into October, where we're going to explore a few paranormal stories, some haunted locations, stories that inspired film, because it is our spooky month of movie club.
It's our month, baby.
It is our month. You know, this is where we really blossom into what is that flower from Dennis the Menace, where it blossoms overnight and then immediately wilts in the morning.
Oh, God.
That's us in October.
Yeah. We're going to shine bright like a diamond and then fade like coal.
Yeah. Like coal. Like a diamond turning to coal. But yeah, that's been the Van Meter Visitor. I know you haven't heard of it, but what are your final thoughts on the description, on the believability? Where does your mind land on this story?
In terms of a cryptid, I think the cryptid itself is a solid cryptid. Mm-hmm. We've had some really okay. But I think what makes this so entertaining is how the town reacted. And I think it's very rare that you get just a town of people with their own different sightings and stories, and all of them end up just blasting at
all of them.
Yeah.
Even the guy that first saw it, after the second encounter, he goes, "No, I also blasted."
Yeah, me too. Right,
yeah, I also did. It is very interesting. It's so much unlike the I would hesitate to say modern, because it was like almost exactly between now and then in 1903 that Mothman and other things kind of really took off. But it's interesting that just a few decades later, people are running and screaming or driving their car away from these things.
Yeah.
There is something to be said about the exponential increase in cryptids as we have the exponential increase in technology and in lights and in just, I don't know. I wonder if it's just like there's more opportunity for visual hallucinations or for conspiracy, again, out of like the fear of change and the fear of advancement. There's something a lot more intellectual underneath all this that I would love to hear the task force thoughts on, like philosophically, intellectually, but
right.
Otherwise, man, I love the idea of a 9-foot beast hanging out on rooftops, taking shotgun shells and just
yep, and then just
disappearing into the mines.
Just gone, man.
Yeah. Well, that's been the Van Meter Visitor Task Force. We'll see you in October for a bunch of movie clubs. So again, come support us for as little as $5 a month, and you get 10% off if you sign up for a year membership. But you'll get a bunch of movie clubs, ad-free podcasts. We do bonus content every month. Last month we did, or actually last week, as of listening to this, we did our Randonautica episode. So we finally pulled out the app.
Yeah, we did.
We went at golden hour because we weren't fully brave, but we were brave enough. And we went out there to see what we would see. It was a good time. Nothing super spooky, but it was fun.
Yeah, but it was fun. And look, you get to see us out and about as a group, and I missed it for sure. We are independent now, and so with independency, we got to be smart about funds. And so it's like, okay, we'll record from home as opposed to being together. And so, as we get more love and support, hopefully one day we can reach that again. But it was great to get everyone together.
Yeah.
And, in person, and then go explore.
Yeah, that bonus is kind of like that bonus video is essentially an excuse to get together. Kind of like we did for Long Legs. We watched that movie together. It's always a good time. And you touched grass. I saw you.
Yeah, I made sure to touch grass.
But with that said, Task Force, thank you all so much for the ongoing support. And Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet another mystery.